Good evening. I am Debbie Scheller from A Likely Story Bookstore, and on behalf of A Likely Story and Carroll County Public Library, welcome to our Summer Read Series. Tonight, we have Emilie Richards in conversation with Diane Chamberlain. Please be sure to type any questions for Emilie and Diane in the chat window, and we will get to them after the conversation. We are very excited to have Emilie Richards return, though virtually, for her book tour. We last had Emilie pre-COVID for her Family of Strangers tour. Emilie is the best-selling author of 70-plus novels, which have been published in more than 21 countries and 16 languages. Emilie has won the Rita from Romance Writers of America and multiple awards from RT Book Reviews, including one for career achievement. Her most recent novel is The House Guests, just released this June, and is a compelling page turner which you won't want to put down. Emilie will be in conversation with Diane Chamberlain. Diane is the New York Times, USA Today, and Sunday Times bestselling author of 27 novels published in more than 20 languages. Influenced by her former career as a social worker and psychotherapist, she writes suspenseful stories that touch both the heart and the mind. Diane's novels include Big Lies in a Small Town, The Dream Daughter, and The Stolen Marriage, just to name a few. Both authors' books are available at A Likely Story Bookstore and the Carroll County Public Library. Thank you both for joining us tonight, and congratulations to you both on your books. And Diane and Emilie, I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, Emilie. So good to see you. I can't believe how long it's been.
It has been. When was the last time we were together? Was it when I visited you in Raleigh?
Yes.
Yeah, that's been a
got to
while.
be about 12 years, I think.
I know.
Emily,
yikes.
It's frightening.
Yeah, it is.
But I read The House Guests and absolutely loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I know. Wouldn't that be awful if I hadn't?
Yeah, it'd be embarrassing.
The reality is, I know, and all of your readers know that they're in safe hands with you more than 70 times. I didn't realize that it was, I knew it was over 60, but I didn't realize you were over, your book number was over 70 now.
Yeah. Imagine how hard it is to come up with a new story when you've written all those books.
Well, I mean, I'm struggling with, I'm starting 29, and I'm struggling with, what's this story going to be?
Yes.
And then I think of you and I think, how did you do it? The thing, you and I talk often about, should we stop? Because we've said everything there is to say. And whenever we do that, you say, yeah, I think this is my last one. And then the next thing I know, you're writing another one. But how does it happen? How do the story ideas come to you?
Well, they don't always come easily. In this book, The House Guest was really hard. I mean, I had the basic idea, which isn't giving anything away, but a homeless woman loses her purse with all her rent money in it and is turned out on the street. And then we find out who took it and how the money was dispersed. And that actually was based on a newspaper article I read so many years ago. I could not retrace it, and I didn't have that in my files. I just had it in my memory, and that's been there ever since. And I've wanted to write that book, but trying to figure out what was the book in there, as you know, is hard. Getting an idea is one thing; making a book out of it is another thing entirely.
That's sort of the thing that fascinates me about writing fiction. Is something as small as that lost purse with all her rent money in it can turn into this amazing book and give birth to these amazing characters.
Now, your last book, the one that's out now, and you have a new one coming out in January, right?
Right, and it's Big Lies in a Small Town is the one that's out now.
Right, and Big Lies in a Small Town is based on a mural in a post office in North Carolina. And that was actually the idea, the germ of an idea that got you moving on that one. But as I've seen in your interviews about it and some of the things you've said, like with me, I had the story, but I didn't have a book. you had a story and you didn't have a book, and it took a long time to put it together.
And you know, in retrospect, it's so much fun to discover how that whole process turned into this book. But when you're just starting out, it's very daunting, isn't it?
It's very daunting. And I made so many changes. Usually when I sit down to write, I've got a pretty good idea and a great outline. I can't tell you how many times it changed. I just, yeah, poor Mark. Mark was alive, then Mark was dead, then Mark was alive, then Mark was dead. I'd kill him off, he'd get resurrected. It was all very difficult.
But that makes me feel so much better, because one of the things when we used to live in the same area in Northern Virginia, and we would actually get together in person, one of the things you said was that you write a chapter and then the next day you revise the chapter and you just go along like that. And at the end you have a book. And for me, it's just a gigantic mess until I've written the whole thing, and then I go back and change everything. So to hear you say that you had to change a lot of things is very reassuring to me.
Well, you know, it just wasn't clear to me what this story was. I knew it wasn't right. I gave the outline to a friend, and then I gave it to my editor, and both of them said, "What are you doing here?" And I'm going like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I know there's a story here. I know I can get it. I'm just not there yet. And even when I was there, I didn't have the same kind of outline I usually have. I didn't have the and this happens next, and this happens next. It wasn't like that. And so through the whole thing, I had to question myself, like, okay, are you losing it? Have you stopped? Have you stopped writing and you just don't know it? It was because it was very different. And I think that's something I learned, is it's not always going to be the same for any author. And you just have to stop questioning yourself and the process and just go ahead and do it.
Well, it really worked. You want to talk a little bit about the book?
Well, I kind of gave you the idea. The book is set in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and I have an interesting connection to Tarpon Springs. I grew up in St. Petersburg, which is not far away, in the same county, actually. And we went on a field trip to Tarpon Springs when I think third grade, maybe fourth grade. And it's the home of, it was settled at the turn of the century. Well, it was a tiny town, but it was settled really by the Greeks who came over to do sponge diving. They found one of the biggest and most productive sponge beds in North America and probably in the world, right there in Tarpon Springs. And the people that knew how to dive for sponges were Greeks on the Dodecanese Islands. So they started bringing them over, and then they stayed and they settled, and they brought their families, and they brought their culture, and they brought their food. Ooh, I'm a big fan of Greek food. So I was entranced with it when I was a little girl. I mean, just so entranced with it. When we moved back to Florida, I kept thinking I really need to set a book there. I didn't want to do it about sponge diving. I've done a deep sea diving book about pearl diving in Australia, and I really didn't want to do it with sponges. But I wanted that whole Greek culture. I wanted the whole town. I wanted just, sponges mentioned and some history there. And so I set it there. And then I wanted my heroine to be, eventually my heroine, it was other people, but it ended up being my heroine, to be from a Greek family in Tarpon Springs. And she comes home with her stepdaughter after her husband dies. And it's a kind of a mysterious death. He dies in a sailing accident, and he's an excellent sailor. There's been problems in their marriage out of nowhere, and she doesn't know what they're about. There are a lot of secrets that she hasn't been able to uncover, including the fact that he was a psychiatrist. Their financial stability has disappeared. And
her stepdaughter is not at all happy with her.
No, her stepdaughter, she's been her stepdaughter's real mother since she was 3 years old. But now the stepdaughter doesn't want anything to do with her. She believes that Cassie, the main character, and her husband Mark had a fight right before Mark went sailing and died in this accident. And so Savannah blames his death on Cassie, and she doesn't want to move from New York, although she's lost her place in a private school there because of something that they think she did. So she's just miserable, and she makes everybody miserable around her. And it was so much fun to write Savannah because, I had 4 teenagers, so I know what they're like. Anyway, Cassie, Savannah does something that makes it very difficult on Amber and her son, and they're kicked out of their house. It's actually the loss. She finds this lost purse of Amber's. This happens at the very beginning, so it's not giving away too much. And spends it on a party with some friends she's made. And when Cassie finds out that she has been responsible for this, a woman's homelessness, and her teenage son who goes to school with Savannah, she invites Will and Amber to come and live with them in their house until they can get established.
And she doesn't know them. So she's really inviting strangers into her house. Yes,
which is why it says on the front cover, be careful who crosses your threshold, because you don't really know.
It's something that a reader is going to ask herself, or at least I asked myself, could I do that? Could I invite these, she feels a real responsibility to help these people, but could I invite strangers to move into my house?
Well, she does a sort of an informal background check, and everybody says that they're really upstanding, good people, but she doesn't really know her, and she doesn't know much about her background other than what local people know about Amber, and hasn't been there very long. So, what would you do, Diane? Would you be able to do that?
No way. But you know what? One thing I love about fiction is that I get to experience these things that I wouldn't do through the characters. And that's how I play it safe.
Is it? Yeah, it's easier to do. Well, I set up a couple of things. One that is Cassie's not at home either. This is a new house for her.
True.
She's confused about her life and what's happened to her. She's feeling very vulnerable. She really wants to teach Savannah what she needs to know to be a good person, and to that when you make a terrible mistake, you have to pay for it in some way. So I know it was tricky, but I do think there are people like Cassie who would have invited her in and said, maybe not for the rest of their lives, but until you can get your life settled, until we can come up with enough money to get you a place to live, then you're here.
Well, Cassie's a wonderful character.
Oh, I'm glad you liked her.
And
You're right.
I was reading some of the Goodreads reviews, and people love this book, of course. And a lot of them were saying, how much they liked Cassie.
I think sometimes when you struggle the hardest with a character, it turns out to be the best character in the book, probably. Mm-hmm. And I had to really struggle with her, where she was from. Her bio in my head changed so many times, but the person she was the person I wanted her to be at the end. Yeah.
I love Tarpon Springs. Is it Tarpon or Tarpon?
Tarpon Springs, yeah. Tarpon Springs. Yeah.
That was fascinating. I was telling John, my significant other, that I was reading your book and that it was set in Tarpon Springs. And he said, well, when did they get to the sponge diving? Which I had known nothing about. And then it was like I turned the page. I said, here I am at the sponge diving. But what I really loved was that Greek restaurant. And it felt so, there's such a sense of family that's very comforting. And, there's a lot of things going on in the book that are not so comforting, but to have this kind of solid family and food that kind of formed a heart of the story, I really liked that.
The restaurant came up late in my plotting. And I wasn't sure I knew enough about, well, I wasn't sure I knew enough about the Greek community, and I wasn't sure I knew enough about Greek food, and I was sure I didn't know enough about restaurants. But it was easy to find out what I needed to know. And of course, along the way, I got to eat a lot of Greek food and cook a lot of Greek food. So that was really great. Go to Greek events when I could get to them. You know, COVID really kind of threw a wrench in that. But before COVID, I got to go to Tarpon Springs to their Epiphany celebration, which is a huge, if not the biggest event on that calendar in Tarpon Springs. And when it was just wonderful. And it was right after that everything shut down. But I did get to have that experience and be in Greek restaurants and see what it was like. And Tarpon Springs really is great. You walk down the street and you'll hear people speaking Greek. I mean, there's really still a lot of, even though the sponge diving is different now, it's much more technical. They go out into the Gulf, they go way out, they're out for weeks. They have, you know, big fancy boats and sonar equipment and all the things they need. But it's still a Greek village, and for the United States, it's as close to a Greek village as we're going to get. And it just makes it so fascinating. It's really a small town. I mean, it's not a big place, but it's just, and it's beautiful. It's Florida. So I love it.
Can you talk about how the cover? I love it. Oops. Something sounded.
Yeah. We're having a little sound problem here. Okay.
I was asking, can you tell us how the cover came to be? Was that the first cover that Mira came up with, or?
Just about. Diane and I have had many conversations about covers, many, and I'm not always happy with them, but the last few covers I've had have just been delightful. I said I wanted a marina. You know, I wanted the sponge docks, but I wasn't going to get that. And I wanted a sunset. And I had these two women in the story. I didn't say I wanted them on the cover, but when they showed me this, I was just entranced. I was delighted because it does gives you the Tarpon Springs feeling, but it also gives you the feeling for the characters. And
do you have the cover there?
I should hold that up.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's see if I can get away from my name.
Oh, that's.
There we go.
I love it because it also captures the kind of the angst.
Yes.
That the characters are going through.
Yeah. And I think they wanted to get away from, the book has more suspense than some of the books I've written. I think a lot of, I've heard you say this, all books have such suspense in them, whether it's a suspense novel or not.
Sure.
But this one there's more going on in the background, more mystery in the background, more unanswered questions, more secrets and lies. And so I think that the cover captured that well too. But we did add the tagline, be careful who crosses your threshold, because the house guests, the title by itself could be anything. Could be a comedy about, your mother coming to stay too long, or it could be just straight women's fiction. We wanted a little something on it to say, no, it's not really just that. There's more going on here.
Well, I think they achieved it. And
you don't have your new cover to show, do you? Because you've showed it on Facebook, and I thought it's really beautiful.
Thank you. This is my upcoming book.
There you go.
This is hard. This is challenging.
Yeah.
It's, where are those people? There they are, down at the bottom.
Yeah, I can't see them. There you go. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I don't know why my light is so blue, but anyhow, it's really a pretty cover. And we had a few interpretations of what the cover should be, but I think that they nailed it with this particular cover.
Did you have any control over it? If you didn't like it, would they listen to you?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? Not like
yeah.
in the early days, is it?
Oh.
You know, they would slap a cover on and that was it. And you'd say, oh, I don't like it. And they essentially said, well, that's too bad. In nicer words than that.
I had one cover that was about horse country in Virginia. You know horse country because you live there too. And I said, whatever you do, make sure you have a horse on the cover, and please get away from putting just houses. I had this whole series of covers that were just houses. So I got this house, and I got the Trojan horse next to it. The horse was like 3 stories tall, and I said, you know, horses really are not 3-story. And they said, well, this artist just really can't do a horse. He can't get it in perspective. So they took the horse out, and I had the house. But at least they didn't have the Trojan horse. Later on, other editions, they got it right. That first edition was funny. Yeah.
And how about the title, The House Guest? Was that yours right from the start?
No, we all loved my original title, which was Lies and Other Mercies was the title.
Oh, that's right. I loved it.
Yeah, I know. So did I. And so did my editor. But then somebody on the marketing team said, it sounds like a short story collection. And it was like, and I think they told me, if you really, really love it, we'll fight for it. But I thought, you know, there's so many battles in life. Why battle on that one? And my editor actually came up with this title, and I liked it right away. Passed it by some other people who weren't as crazy about it, but she and I liked it, and so we went with it. And I still think it's a good title.
I think so too, because it immediately makes you start wondering. And plus, for somebody who doesn't want to have people stay forever in my house, you know, it immediately sets me up thinking, what's going to happen?
Yeah. In my last newsletter, I asked my readers to tell me stories about house guests in their life, you know, and some of the stories are hair-raising. They really are. People have written me stories, and in 3 or 4 sentences, they have given me the willies. Is this what it's really like for some people to have house guests? Yeah.
A whole new book idea.
Yeah.
Now, none of this means that I don't want you to come visit.
Oh, I'll stay elsewhere.
Can you tell us a little bit about your life? Because you spend most of the time in Florida, and then you go up to Chautauqua, New York.
Where you've been.
I have not been to Chautauqua.
You haven't been. You almost came. Okay.
I always dream about coming and haven't been. Yeah. So what
you have a standing invitation.
What is it like being in Chautauqua? Because it sounds to me so amazing with the speakers and the events that go on there.
It is amazing. Every day there is something fabulous going on. It's a 9-week season, and there's a lecture every morning, and there are religion lectures in the afternoon, and there's other lectures are interspersed through the day with different organizations to do them. Then we have an event at night. We have our own symphony. We have our own opera. We have our own theater company. So there's always something wonderful going on. However, I will say that that's not going on this year. It's last year, for the first time in history, there was no season. People came up. We didn't come up because it felt too dangerous to drive up from Florida at that point. But this year, it's what I'm calling Chautauqua Light. It's just a kind of an abbreviated season, fewer of everything. However, it's still just wonderful to be here, except for the rain, which you can see behind me. It's been raining for days. Yeah, but it's great. We stayed, last time we were here in 2019, we stayed through October. The season's over in August. And we stayed. I wanted to see the colors change, which you don't see in Florida.
Yeah.
So, and they're beautiful here, like they are in New England. So that was great. We're in Western New York. This year we'll probably leave at the end of September, very beginning of October. Yeah.
It sounds like really good.
Yeah, it's really good. We're really lucky that we have this place, and it's close to 2 of our 4 children, and they come up when they can, and we can see our other children as we travel, one in North Carolina in Asheville and one in Charlottesville, Virginia. So we get to see our kids on the way up and the way back and in between. It's really nice.
Kind of perfect.
Yeah, it is. That's really the reason we're here. And all 4 of our grandchildren are only in Ohio, which is not far from here. So,
Okay, so the question that I almost hate to ask you, what's next?
Well, Diane, you know that I can't, whatever I say won't be true. I'll think it's true. I am working on, I had a series, the Shenandoah album series about quilters in the Shenandoah Valley. And the publisher decided it was over before I felt like it was over. So I'm working on a collection of novellas about 3 of the quilters who are not major stars of the series, but who have shown up in the series, and I thought people would like to know more about them. And I've had a wonderful time. They're written. Just working. I need to work on the epilogue and then and send it to an editor. I've got a great cover for it, so that'll be out from time to time.
Oh, that's exciting. You've always got something going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened, but I do. And I have another book idea that I'm playing with. So, yeah, didn't mean to, but I am. Yeah.
You're a machine.
No, it's just, it's so hard when you have 5 minutes to sit quietly and these characters come and kind of knock on, your psyche and say, have you forgotten me? I did this in my past and you didn't know it. And it's like, oh no. Yeah.
Well, I have to say I'm glad you're keeping at it. Because
thank you.
There's one thing, it's so nice to have an author that you can count on, that you kind of know what you're going to get, that there's going to be an element of mystery, and there's going to be warmth and something comforting and a good ending. And that's what
so nice. Well,
yeah, it's true.
It's a mutual admiration society, because when people ask me who I read, I say, well, I read Diane Chamberlain. I mean, always,
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you tell us anything about your upcoming book? What little bit you can share, since it's not until January?
The Last House on the Street.
Which is a great title.
It wasn't mine. But,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
I can't remember what I was calling it. But it's a dual timeline. It's 1965 and 2010. And in 1965, it was the heart of the civil rights movement. And students from the North and the West came south to be part of a program where they would register Black voters to vote. And so it was right before the Voting Rights Act was signed by President Johnson.
Yeah.
So I have a young Southern woman who wants to be part of that for her own personal reasons. She wants to help out in that, but she's bucking up against her parents and the society that she's in to be able to do that work. But she perseveres, because that's how we like our characters. We want them to be strong. And then in 2010, there's a young woman and her daughter. Her husband has recently died. Does that sound familiar? Her husband has recently died, and she's moving into a new house that she and her husband designed. They were both architects. And she begins to get signs, messages that she should not move into this house. So we go back and forth between these 2 stories that, of course, are going to be connected at some point. And sort of like you, it was tough to write, because I started out in one place with one idea, and then that character needed to be dead, or another character needed to be alive. And it just, there's a lot of changes that went into it, but I'm really, really happy with it. And as with your books, I'm seeing wonderful, heartwarming reviews on Goodreads. So it's always, You know, when your book is a new baby, it's so scary. You don't know what the readers are going to think of it. And so it's always a wonderful feeling when you start to see the reviews coming in.
So people are already reviewing it, huh? That's great.
Through NetGalley, or the ARCs just went out. So so there should be even more.
Super.
So,
You do a lot of that back and forth between people in the past and in stories in the past and the present. And I did that, a lot of that, when I started writing single title. And one of the things that truly impresses me when I read your books every time is how you can keep these little stories so short on both ends, and yet there's no dearth of what needs to be said. I mean, they're very complete, they're very nuanced, but you don't go on and on. I mean, you're really excellent at just kind of this happened and showing it and giving the reader a real sense of it, and then moving on into a different era. I really admire that.
Are you talking about the chapters themselves, or short?
Well, the chapters, but the whole idea of, switching time periods. In Big Lies in a Small Town, you've got two characters. You've got Anna, and then you've got Morgan. And it'll be Anna's story, and it'll be really an important part of her story. You don't spend a whole lot of time before and after. This is it. This is what happened, and then you move on to the next character and the next time frame. And I think that's really hard. You do that really well.
Well, thank you. I mean, what I'm trying to do when I write is leave a chapter at a point where I want the reader to go back, be anxious to go back to that time. But I want to make the past and the present equally as engaging, if I can. It doesn't
I think you do.
For every reader, but
well, there are readers. I've had the same kind of. I've had feedback where people say they don't want me to go back and forth because they just get interested in one story and then they go back. But, there's always going to be people that don't like that style. It's just, it is what it is. But a lot of other people appreciate the in-depth kind of double stories and the way that they're going to dovetail eventually.
And so back to House Guests for a minute. You are in Cassie's point of view. You're in Savannah's point of view. You're in Amber's point of view. I don't think you're ever in Will's point of view.
No, I'm not in Will's point of view because he's always with either Amber or Savannah, and we don't really need to know what he's thinking.
Yeah. I love the relationship that developed between Savannah and Will.
Yeah, I did too. She was so rotten. But she was just your rotten 15-year-old girl. But I love starting with a character that you don't like and moving to like them in the story. Something readers don't always like, I've discovered. Some of my favorite books, people, and I don't mean in my own particularly, but other people's, they start out and they say, I don't like this character, I don't want to read about it, not realizing there's going to be this amazing arc and you're going to find out what changes this character and how they change. And for me, that's I love that. So I loved writing Savannah because I knew she was going to get better. Yeah.
And Cassie is an amazing character. I want to be like Cassie, but I'll never be like Cassie.
Well, she has her, I said to somebody that if I had been as patient with my children as she was with Savannah, who knows how they would have turned out. Yeah. She was just a really wonderful mother. And the fact that she could put up with her and stand up to her when she needed to, but understand where she was coming from and love her anyway, was, that's kind of the perfect sort of parent that you hope for. I bet you were that kind of a stepmom, weren't you?
Well, I think I was a pretty good stepmom. And I think part of it was because I worked with teenagers professionally, but also what I did intentionally was not come on too strong. I sort of held back and let them feel me out. And I think that really helped. You know, even though I was desperate to be their stepmother, because I just adored them, I just knew that they had to get used to the idea that there was another woman living in the house where their mother used to live. So I took it as slowly as I could.
I think it's kind of, in my life, I've seen lots of these kinds of relationships because my husband is a minister and we, know a lot of people. I think yours is one of the best relationships I've seen with stepdaughters. They love you, they include you. Now that their dad has passed on, you're still part of their family. They just, you have a very special place in their life. And that's what I wanted for Cassie and Savannah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really, really lucky because they are three special people, and all of their husbands, the two husbands, are really special. And then to have grandchildren when I had no children of my own, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I saw the picture of you, the whole family together recently, and that was wonderful. What a beautiful photo.
Yeah, I just feel so fortunate.
So I have 4 kids, and I know how challenging it is to have children. And I always love writing as a mother of a child in a story because I can do everything right that I wasn't always able to do right in real life. Yeah.
Well, that makes me wonder what your children think of your books.
It's normal life for them. Let's face it. I've been writing since the 1980s. They grew up with me writing. The little one, who's not little anymore, not at all little. He's 6'3".
Oh, wow.
But he was really a baby on my lap when I started writing. So they're just assumed that everybody's mother writes. I mean, I don't know, but they're all proud of me, but it's not a big deal. It's nice. It's the way you want it.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, we are getting quite a few questions and we're getting a lot of love and congrats to you both for your books.
That's nice.
So if you are ready, I'd like to give you guys some questions or field you some questions. First, Julia would like to know, to both of you, how has it been writing during the pandemic? Emilie, you want to start?
Sure. Well, one problem was that I learned from experience never to set a book when you're writing during the period of time you're writing because things can happen. And I knew that. And I thought I was safe. And then I did the math and figured out the months for when my book ended. I had my calendar and I had it ending right in the pandemic. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, I couldn't have that. So in terms of my story, I had to set the whole story back a year. Not that anybody would know or care, but I did. Mm-hmm. So I had to do that. In terms of my own, and I'm hearing this from other authors, when nothing comes in, sometimes nothing goes out again. So I did fine. We lived in Florida. Instacart became our best friend. We went for long walks because we were safe out in the outdoors. But when I got home and sat down at the computer, an awful lot of the time it felt like there was nothing there. I had to finish this book, and that was helpful because I knew what was going to happen, and I could make myself finish it. But in terms of new ideas, it was just really tough. How about you, Diane?
Actually, just life as usual for me. Just sitting and writing.
Yeah.
So I can't say that it was all that different. What was different was not getting to, my one outlet is a guitar group that I would get together with once a week in this sleazy bar. And so obviously we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So that I really, really missed that outlet, because that, you'd write and write and write, and then you'd have this wonderful outlet. So that was kind of sad, but otherwise it was just life as usual for me.
We've heard that from quite a few authors that, writing is such a solitary thing anyway. So it wasn't a lot of changes, but I think a lot agree with Emilie in that not only was, I think I've heard a lot of what they're calling COVID brain, where, that concentration or that ideas aren't flowing like they used to.
Yeah.
I think that even with reading, you just don't have that concentration that you used to have. So hopefully we're all getting past that, and we'll see more of the writing and the reading going on. From Marjorie, who loves you both, is very anxious to see. I think she said she just finished. She loves The House Guests, and she's halfway through Big Lies. And she was wondering, this is for Diane, is there a photo of the painting in your book that anybody can look at? Is there somewhere that...
No, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It does not exist. It's
Your
only
imagination. Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's what there you go. You can do a painting for us, Diane. And Lisa says you can't go wrong with an Emilie Richards book. She's very pleased for your next one.
Oh, that's nice.
This is from Bella. Do you ever base any of your characters on real people? And this is for both of you. And she says to Emilie, I read somewhere that your characters are sometimes a little autobiographical. Is that correct?
I think that all our characters are autobiographical. You don't even know when you're writing them until later. Sometimes years later, you look at something and go like, oh, yeah, I know where that. You too, Diane, does that happen to you sometimes? It's just, I don't say, oh, let's write about this experience in my life. I never do that. And I don't write about people I know because, as I said, my husband is a minister, and that's the last thing on earth I would ever do. I mean, for their sake and my own, really. But yeah, but you watch people. That's who we are. And when we're bored and we're sitting somewhere, we're watching people and thinking, look how she does this, or I wonder what she's thinking, or where is she from, or all this stuff starts to just kind of twist together in your mind. So in that way, little teeny pieces of what you see show up, but not whole characters. How about you, Diane?
No, absolutely not. No, I have never based anybody on anybody. And really, I feel like that's really limiting too. If you can't make a character do what you want them to do, if you're trying to fit them into some kind of mold. But I do exactly what Emilie said, is when I, especially later, if I read something that I read, I can see that I was trying to work something out for myself. I was trying to be a little braver, so I made a character who was brave, or kinder, so I make a character who is kind. So I can see bits of myself or who I want to be in those characters.
Yep.
I'm skipping to this question because it kind of goes along with that. Linda would like to know, what was your toughest character that you have ever written? Diane, why don't you start?
Oh, thank you.
I know it's actually not hard for me to think of, but it goes all the way back to my third novel. So it's a long time ago. And I wrote about a woman who was really afraid of life. And so she lived in a cave. And it was both challenging and kind of thrilling to write her life. So she's remained a favorite character of mine, but it was, especially being my third book, I didn't really have my sea legs under me yet. So it was very challenging.
Okay, Emilie?
I'd have to really give that some thought, but I did write a book called The Swallow's Nest, which was about a custody suit, and among three women: the mother, the stepmother. I seem to write a lot of stepmother books, Diane. I don't know what that's about. And the grandmother. And each one of those characters was hard to write about because two of them were very selfish. The one who legally had the least probably right to have the child, the stepmother, was the best of the three by far in terms of the person that this child should be with. But she had issues too. She had family issues and she had issues in her marriage. So all of those characters were really hard to write. So I that might be up there in my top 10 somewhere.
Okay. So some people put your books in a genre called women's fiction. Do you agree with that? Do you like that title? Why or why not? Emilie, why don't we start with you?
I think it's a catch-all. It's fiction that is aimed at women, written by women, usually edited by women too. But it's bigger and broader than the romance genre. It doesn't even have to have a romance, although most of the time there's relationships. It's the stories about the things that really are important to women. So I call what I write women's fiction a lot. This book we're calling either domestic suspense or suspenseful women's fiction is the way my editor describes it. And I thought that was probably as close to anything as we're ever going to get. How about you, Diane?
I honestly don't know what I write. I started out definitely writing women's fiction, and gradually it's morphed over time, but it's morphed into something that's really hard to categorize. You know, sometimes suspense, sometimes mystery, sometimes women's fiction. Every book I write, I would say, has some suspense in it. But in terms of where to stick it on the shelf in the bookstore, I know that how hard that can be sometimes.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that as a bookseller,
Yeah.
especially when you write, like you said, sometimes it's mystery suspense, sometimes it's just a good, women's fiction novel, sometimes there's romance, so it makes it, kind of a catch-all. In our store, and I know each store is different, but both of your books we put under general fiction. We don't have something that says women's fiction just because we don't want to segregate it out.
Sure.
So we put it under general, though it could go in our mystery suspense a lot of times. It's hard to, pick it out, but we don't like to separate the authors from all of their books. We like to keep, your collections together too.
And sometimes if you put a book in the wrong, well, not wrong, but say I've had people, this was described, The House Guest was described as a thriller in some of the PR material. That's not what I think of as a thriller. But the people who read it expecting a thriller, I mean, Hannibal Lecter is Silence of the Lambs, that's a thriller. But they were going like kind of disappointed. No, it's more like a novel about women. Yeah, well, right. It is what it is.
And the domestic thriller or domestic suspense has been a new phrase that's been coming out over the last couple of years. And so we're using that a little bit more, though we're not having a specific category for it. But that, I think, is much more accurate a description as well as that a thriller. So, yeah.
That's good.
Virginia, let me see. Okay, so Virginia, was there anything in either of your novels that you had to edit out that was really tough for you to edit out?
Whoa. Now, I edited out 25,000 words.
Wow.
But I did that. I write long. I write way too long. I know it. And when I saw how many words there were in this book, I did that before anybody else saw it.
Okay.
Was it tough? No, it wasn't. There was a lot of extraneous material. When you're writing a long book, you sometimes will say the same thing 5 different ways. And then at the end, you pick out the one that was the best and most important place in the book for it. So there was a lot of that, just a lot of extra words, repetition. So I wouldn't say that was hard. It was very time consuming. It was word by word, but yeah. How about you, Diane?
I had a character that is in the early part of the story in Big Lies in a Small Town, and then he comes back halfway through. And my editor felt that it wasn't needed. It wasn't a needed plot point. And ultimately, I agreed with her. But changing that changed everything else, of course. So it was a lot of work, but it was absolutely the right thing to do.
You get along really well with your editor and trust her. And so when she asks you to make changes, I know that hasn't always been the case with this editor. With this editor, it's always been the case, but you're really okay with that. It doesn't bother you when you're asked to
I only have, a few moments of angst over it, but I have really learned to trust her. She's pretty amazing.
Good.
And so yeah, I always think it through and ultimately realize she's right and do what she suggested.
That's great.
It is. I'm very lucky.
This is a two-part question from Nina, who is a wannabe author. She's currently working on her first novel for the past 10 years. She's asking, are you a plotter or a pantser? And with both of you having so much success, do you still have writing goals that you try to meet?
Go ahead, Emilie.
I am a plotter. I am right down to the wire a plotter, but you spend a whole lot of time on your plot before you write the first sentence. So I do up front what pantsers do as they're writing. So it's really, it's a different, like, when are you going to get organized? Are you going to do it first, or are you going to do it as you're writing the story? I don't know. I think Diane's saying that she's kind of some of both. I want to hear what she has to say, but I know that I could not write if I didn't have something waiting for me when I went to the computer. I could not just go and say, okay, what am I going to write about today? I couldn't do that. I have to have it all kind of organized and worked out. It doesn't mean it isn't going to change. It can change a lot, but I want to know when I sit down what I'm supposed to do that day. It just really, really makes it, the anxiety tamped down enough that I can actually write.
Okay, Diane.
I am a plotter. But so I outline. I write a long, beautiful outline. But what I always say is that my characters did not see the outline. And so as soon as I start to write, they do things that I didn't expect. They don't sound like I expected them to sound. And so at that point, I become a pantser. So, and I like that because that's where surprises come from for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is going back to the last question, I believe. Marjorie would like to know the character, Diane, you were talking about. Would that be Trey? Yes. Okay.
Good guess.
You talked a little bit about this before as to what you're both writing now. Is there anything else you want to say about what you're writing now? And what are you both reading now? This is from Catherine.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got... I read The Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, and I really loved it. It was just what I needed at that moment. It was a really fun book. She's a great writer. She's funny, but she's had a good story, and the characters were really interesting. Had a lot of surprises in it. So I went to the library and got another book of hers, and I can't even tell you the name of it because I haven't opened it. But right now I'm reading a book by Minette Walters, and it's I can't tell you the name of it. I haven't gotten very far. Here at Chautauqua, I can walk to the library. Never in my life have I been able to walk to a library and just go through the stacks and just say, well, that looks like fun. I'll grab that. So that's really neat. And I like Minette Walters. I like I like Tanya. No, okay, I'm blanking. But anyway, huh?
Tanya French?
Yeah, Tanya French. I really like her.
Yeah.
And of course, I like Diane, but I really like books with some substance in them. But I also like to read just throwaway, fun, cozy mysteries. Not that all cozy mysteries are throwaway, but just that they're fun and they're funny and the characters are silly. And depending on my state of mind, that's what I'm writing and what I'm reading. Yeah.
Okay. Diane, how about you?
Well, I just read The House Guests. That's the most recent thing I read. And before that, I read, oh boy, Writers and Lovers, or Lovers and Writers, which
I love that book.
Alexander McCall Smith?
No,
no,
Lily King. Lily King.
Oh, Lily. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
very different from what I usually read, because I think because the protagonist was in her 30s and just a much different place than me. And I really, really enjoyed it, and the writing is beautiful.
Oh, good. Sounds good.
I enjoyed that one too, Diane, and I loved that she could spend so much time in a restaurant describing the patrons, what was happening behind the scenes, what they were serving, and make it fascinating and fun and beautifully written. It was just really, I love that book. Yeah.
Emilie, this is from Linda. She was asking about, she remembers you speaking about say the word. I'm going to say
Chautauqua.
Chautauqua.
That is a hard word, isn't it?
She was talking about that when you were here last time and was happy to hear you're up there now. She says, how about writing something about Chautauqua? Would you ever put someplace in it?
No way. This place has been around since just past the Civil War. And it has a body of knowledge about it, about all the customs and rituals and what was done and what wasn't done and how it was done and what you could do and what you couldn't do. And there is no way that I would be able to research that so perfectly that I would get everything right. And besides which, I would offend a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, some things just need to be kept for themselves. Don't think that's going to ever happen. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much tonight. We're out of time, and we really appreciate you both being here virtually. Hopefully next year, maybe we can do it in person. And don't forget, you can purchase your book at A Likely Story online. Come in or give us a call. We have both Diane and Emilie's. We have a lot of their collection. So please come in and say hi. And don't forget to join us for our next summer to be read for the summer. Keep in touch. Thank you both. See you soon.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much. Good job.
Great to see you, Emilie. Thanks, Debbie.